argument went on for years in a very boring way. And students of my generation reacted against the whole notion of systems, the sort of Mark Hartman Thomas view of systems, and of modular coordination. Then, some years later, in 1961, a book came on to the English market called New Ways of Building. The Turning Point of Building. Sorry, Konrad. Which I bought, I think, almost one of the first copies out of Tarantus then. And it had an amazing effect on me and a lot of other people. It's an incredible book. It put together by Konrad Wachsmann and gave another view of building, a completely different view. A book full of ideas and inventions, a book that even talked about people like Alexander Graham Bell and airships and bicycle frames. A book that talked about education and about teamwork. And so for me, this was an important, very, very important thing. It's a book I still have, the same copy, and it's very dog-eared, and I still look at it, and it goes everywhere with me. One other thing, I think I'd like to give just one anecdote. I was in Los Angeles just recently at USC, and there was a prize giving. And Konrad and I were going out to dinner that evening, but he was asked to stay for the prize giving, and we didn't quite know what was going on. And at the end of the prize giving, a letter was read out from the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, saying that they were very pleased to announce that they had unanimously awarded Konrad a fellowship of the AIA. Not a fellowship? It was even worse than that? Honorary fellowship of the AIA.
Remember, he said,
right.
The beauty of this is I don't have to pay dues.
That's right. That's right. And it was, Konrad went up, he was very surprised and got this, and he came back laughing. And I was very puzzled why he found it so amusing. And he told me the story that in the 40s, I forget which year, a lot of friends of his had suggested that he ought to apply for membership of the AIA. Yes. And he was nominated by Gropius and many other eminent people like Breuer. And he was turned down because he had no lack of experience, I think, was the
Lack of
qualifications in architecture. So it was quite amusing for him to feel that 30 years later the AIA decided that he met with their qualifications. And the other thing I'd like to say, I mean, which in a sense sums up Konrad for me as a man that's of today. I said to him when he arrived, "How did you get here?" And he said, "I flew from Washington." And I said, "Wow." And he said, "On Concorde. What a way to fly." I introduced Konrad Wachsmann. You just put it over your head.
Now, before we do this, I think I did enough, and I can take my coat. Yeah. It is impossible to be here. So, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. This anecdote had an after effect. The AIA, which is something, the same, what is it here, the Royal Institute of British Architects. Yeah? And I had a strange hate and love affair with those people. and was never on real good terms with them. And so they certainly decided to give me an honorary membership of the AIA, which is a distinction which happened very seldom, except it is absolutely useless for me in my age, and I have no use for honorary memberships in the AIA. And I asked them why they do this, and then probably it turned out it may be at this moment useful to them because now they can pretend as if they are interested in progress in architecture. You know, this is the old story, which is probably difficult to explain, but some of you may understand what I mean by that. I followed a party in the county museum with all those people around there, and I have such a magnificent filing system in my office that my secretary managed to produce this particular letter which Ron just mentioned from the year 1944, which I think it's a piece of art to find that letter in my file. So I made a Xerox copies, keep the Xerox copies for good. And then there have been press photographers, and they wanted this is depressing and devastating to see how there is a president of the AIA standing there with a document so like this, and I should stay at the other side and hold it with the other hand, and then you can this badly designed diploma, you know, you can read it, you know. So I said, no, sir, I'm terribly sorry. I happen to have a letter here in my pocket, and what we do, we make now an exchange. And then I make this arrangement, he holding with the right hand the honorary membership, and I holding with the left hand the document which says, we regret to accept you for lack of qualification, which was absolutely insane, because at this time I was not a baby anymore, and anybody had at least that many qualifications to satisfy the American Institute of Architects. So this is the end of the story. And I hopefully, even if it is my weakness always to talk a little bit too long, I would like to make it very short, because I suffer here in this room, which is a very nice room, but it is climatically unbearable and inhuman. So I would like to go as fast as possible through those few things which I wanted to say. There's also one thing, the Concorde. I said I would do land a coup here and would arrive on the Concorde just to please Peter Cook and say, this is the way all your guests should arrive in style, in the vehicle of the 21st century. And today I met a gentleman here, a very nice man, and he said, oh, here in the street corner. And he said, you don't know me, I know you, and I am the man who represents, I don't know if you ever heard his name, he's a local man from America, his name is Buckminster Fuller. And he said, I represent him here in America. He sent his greetings, he is leaving, I think, today for Chicago, and he was very proud to let me know that he is going back on the Concorde. So, to Washington, I'm sorry. And he of course, he always has beaten me, and so finally, in my old age, I succeeded. I came already 3 days ahead of him, arrived in this country. There's a very strange relationship, because if I did it for kicks or for whatever reason, but there's a certain generation, they like to test such things, like, for instance, flying with mesh 2, twice the speed of sound, and so on. And now, whatever may be the reason, I think tonight it may be some interest to some of you to know what motivates me in doing what I am doing. Why I have chosen or must go. I have not chosen. Must go this one-way street, and for me, does no other way exist. And I do not want to enter some self-analysis, but I think I may develop few reasons to just to let you know why I do those things and why I think how or let me better say, let you know how I see my world, how I see the past, the non-existent present, and the future, of course. And to do this, I would like to begin with something which may satisfy your national pride, namely that two British queens, or do you say English queens? Both. Okay. Two British queens have once in their lifetime made statements which have had the most decisive effect on my own life. And this is a very strange thing. The first one you probably may guess was Queen Victoria, who inaugurated and sponsored and inaugurated the Crystal Palace in the first industrial exhibition in this world. For instance, in America, everybody talks so much about the Crystal Palace, and very few people, when I always make this my hobby, to ask them, oh, by the way, what has been exhibited there, which kind of paintings and so on. And nobody knows what has been shown in this exhibition. And now, Madam, you can see the civilization standard of the United States of America. I am not responsible, but this is a fact. So, but now, who was the second queen? Evidently, after Queen Victoria, there is only one, and this is still living queen, your Queen Elizabeth II. Right? And if you talk so much about royal house, I'm not necessarily a royalist, but this is another story. But Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth II, has about, I think it may, I do not remember how many years ago, but I have the feeling between 15 or 20 years ago, inaugurated, personally, I read it in the papers, I was in America at this time, and the first nuclear power plant ever built, I believe, in Great Britain. Is this correct? Do you know anything about it? Peter, is it true? You don't. Well, you see, this I wanted to see. You can see how illiterate Americans are and how much more illiterate British are, you know. And I was sure of it. So, in both cases, the consequences have been could not be overestimated. I do not want to dig into the history case of the Industrial Revolution, which right now you will have very soon the opportunity to read another book which I read already in the French language, a book written with the title The History of the Industrial Revolution of the Middle Ages, also in French, I would have to translate it, which has been written by a dear friend of mine and a man who is sitting here, Jean Gimpel, and who also wrote this formidable book, Les Bâtisseurs des Cathédrales, the builder of the cathedrals, which probably many of you may know. If you don't, you should read it. This is one of the key books in this work. Now, I want to go into my story now and to tell you what motivates me. It is, of course, for instance, something in connection with the inauguration of the nuclear power plant of Queen Elizabeth II. But I recognize, at the other hand, my situation is rather difficult here because, for instance, a few days I arrived here in this country and somebody gave me this architectural design which originally has been in the hands of Santa Monica Pigeon. I come from Los Angeles, you understand. And I read an article, just enthusiastically come to London and join the group of people which will now will now inform us what is in stake. And I read that article here. Whatever happened to this system approach? We haven't heard about it anymore. So, which would actually normally would mean I should better go back where I came from. And then I have here an article which yesterday was a young, nice man who is a journalist, and he asked me some embarrassing questions, and he gave me this magazine, and I found a sentence in which, sorry, you took my coat, can you throw me my eyeglasses? Yeah, I cannot read without them. Sorry. I have to look for this article. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to. Where is it? Here. It is worth to find it. Yeah. This has now, since it is so hot, we have to think fast and we have to switch every minute from one problem into the next problem. For instance, I have another problem. This is terrible. I need my cue cards on your coat. Yeah, it says it's a pack. Yeah, it's a pack. Also, so we make this a sport. I'm sorry. I put it here on the floor. Yeah. Yeah, I'm absolutely safe now. It has some reference not only to the context of those remarks about let me say, of the consequences which the inauguration of the nuclear power plant really has on society. It has maybe some relationship to certain lectures which I heard here in the last 3 days. And there is a sentence here, this headline says, what happened actually to the system approach? And here it says, somebody, GLC house plans will give more, better, cheaper buildings. And then there's one sentence which I think is formidable. The house plans have not been designed around the use of special components, and they can be built using any form of construction. So this kind of characteristic is something worth to laudate. Yeah, so this is something good. So now I have here a scheduled card, and I will now very quickly go to this. I would like to give few reasons which motivate me. Then I will show you few slides which are just meaningless pictures, some of them are very beautiful and very nice. Not all of them are my own. My friends lend me them, or they make duplicates and so on. but I think you can sense what what I mean by those references, whereby picture and what I said has something to do in common. I believe I will not use accompanying texts. I would say we know all those things, that all inventions in our time are actually born and set in motion in the 19th century, and the 20th century actually uses those inventions and now applies them to, in the beginning, the kind of experimental stage to those events which structure our various societies. And it is quite evident, the history of energy. This I have learned as a child. When I was tired, I had no energy, and I heard this quite often: Konrad, you have no energy, why don't you pull yourself together? Or because everything bored me and I didn't know what I wanted, but I sensed already right from the beginning, energy is something to deal with, and we know this. Everybody knows it, and very few people do something about it. For instance, there is a difference between, of course, manpower and the human energy, or the first tools and the hand tools, and then the mechanical tools, and then came the steam engine, and then came electricity, and all this we know, and finally came this very, very strange story, which now very soon we will see in the Smithsonian Institute, the history case of the fossil fuel, the gasoline, or the petrol, as you say, the petrol story, which may take 100 years in the history of man, and will so disappear like gaslight, which once upon a time was also one of those very dominating factors in history. So I see our world, my world, this is my own very world, as a situation in between two situations, namely the time which has been, which is the past, the history, but also between the time which will come, which is the future, which I feel we are very close to this so-called future, not as a pipe dream and not as a Jules Verne story, but as a very real fact story which will happen very soon. And now when whatever I experience, and there is of course a very important factor to be considered, namely that my educational background is exclusively restricted to be trained and educated as a craftsman, as a carpenter, cabinet maker, and so on, in a trade in which I worked many years, about 7 years after a period of complete failure in school. And then I learned all those things which you learn there by force, and they get stuck, and you sometimes really, you can see this very clearly. You know, for instance, I see it on many people when I studied them. I always sensed they must have been craftsmen. Let me say, Mies van der Rohe was such a classical type as a stonemason. He couldn't do anything else, but he later really did. And so I'm dealing now certainly with a situation where I have practically to deny my whole life's education, everything what I learned in my life. But I had to really to gain something, to understand that here are energies at play which men never could dream about, and those energies which consequently have been those energies which motivated machines. Machines without energy wouldn't exist, and energy without machines would not be of any consequence in the life of men. So I have been driven closer and closer to those very naive and preliminary discoveries which took place about in the middle 20s. And then I saw everything appears in a different way, and mainly in a different scale. So details, little things became trivial and insignificant. The individual house became almost ridiculous. It became very soon a kind of social event which had to be studied, and by doing so it became, of course, in the very beginning, a highly political event, which, for instance, became pretty clear to me. We couldn't talk about it because it became gradually so hot when Jonah Friedman delivered a speech about the difference between the need, or let me see, the need for poor people and the well-to-do society when the rich people come together to help the poor people. And then he says, quite rightly, I said, since you happen to be only rich and don't know only the good life, you cannot possibly understand what poor people do. And I feel very strongly this is actually a direct political event. So I became, in my early time, I was, I think, politically very interested, and maybe at certain times politically activist, or however you may call it. And then I developed let me say, my attempt to think objectively gave me some need. Let me see, everything is a political, social, economical, scientific, and technical event which may trigger the next stage, which must come after this, because without answering those 5 questions in this order as I mentioned them, political, social, economical, scientific, and technological, can no decision be made. You cannot, I mean, you can, of course, you know, we have seen it recently, and we see it every day. You can make, somebody has $200,000, and then it goes to an architect and can build me one of your very fascinating houses. He can do it because he has the money, and since he has the money, he thinks he has the right to decide what he wants to have. And the other architect said, as I heard some other architect saying, well, my social conscience tells me what I do is I ask the people how they like it, if they like the French Riviera style, or the La Ciotat, or Frejus, or wherever that may be, with those beautiful American or English yachts there in front of their houses, where originally the fisher boats, the rowboats may have been in a better scale to those houses. We build it for you that way, as long as you are happy and the house is cheap. Now, this, of course, in my language, is a direct lead in the corruption, devastation, and is the end of any kind of concept of civilization. And but if I can use human knowledge to its utmost, if I can begin to learn, if I find something where I can learn, not to apply my own genius and go around and say, look, am I not marvelous, and I can design those beautiful things, I don't know how to build them, but we can buy contractors, they make it for me, and they will know. And this is, of course, something to really we have to observe. Now, then comes the other thing. In my early years, I was very young. I may have not been older than 24, so when I for the first time realized it is only this what you can repeat is meaningful. And the individual masterpiece is almost the escapade, which one can say, that's very nice, but only one man can have it. And this has then to do with the political, social, economical conscience and so on. But it reminded me, for instance, I loved those essays from Paul Valéry, which you may know. Do you have to see in your library? And He wrote a beautiful essays. They are direct written for Artigram, I assure you. Paul Valéry, V-A-L-E-R-Y. And he is a French philosopher and essayist, and he died about 1900 and I think in the 20s. Yeah. And he said, for instance, the recipe is more important than the medicine. The medicine is a finished product. The recipe is how to make it is more important than the medicine. Those are words which get stuck in my mind. Or, for instance, he said, I am only interested in what can be repeated. What cannot be repeated has no significance and no importance. So something like this. Or Paul Beckmann, the German painter, he made beautiful remarks about, he said, if you want to experience the fantastic, the absolutely mystery, then just study the law of nature and everything will be clear to you. So things like this. Yeah. Now, all this takes now place in the world in which I now became how do you say this? All the world is a stage and all men and all women are merely actors. And I am one of those actors, became one of those actors. In this time in which suddenly, like in this chessboard game, certainly the population grows and evidently has now reached 4 billion people and will very soon hopefully reach 6 billion, 7 or 8 billion people. And people have then immediately, of course, for a very basic, profound, deep, selfish reason, the tendencies to say, we don't like to have too many people around and too many strangers. We have enough, 3 billion, this is ideal. They didn't realize that once before have been 2 billion people, you know, they think 3 billion is just right because it's their time. Now, I have a different feeling. It is the 4 billion people will very soon be 6 or 8, as I said, but it will not anymore be, as it has been before, the number which counts. Something else will count. And this is, those people now already, by the turn of this century, will be already people, the product of societies of which to the greatest extent, for instance, illiteracy has been removed, disappeared, and they all went to schools. I am amazed how good elementary schools and junior high schools, so the American average schools are, and they all can read and write, and they can see television, they get information. Those will be educated, informed people, and to a certain extent enlightened people which beginning slowly to develop certain notions and ideas about what has to be done and what they really want. And they become demanding people. They will ask questions and will demand that certain services must be rendered if they want to, if such things like the building profession exist. And those people will also become critics. Today we don't have critics. Today people don't know. We have, for instance, you can see this so often, we have, for instance, situations where the architects say, well, I have a housing project and I invited the 50 parties which may occupy the houses to tell me what they want to have. So I let the talking about some kind of teamwork. This is not teamwork. This is not what we are talking about. This is lip service for something which can never work, because who educated those people, who enables those people to make decisions? And I became very, very much convinced that one has to take care of, to enlighten people. The ghettos of academic institutions and schools must be removed. The fences must fall down, and and it is not only that the club members between themselves understand each other, but the people outside must understand what the issue is. And there will be automatically, of course, in reference to the enormous, absolutely enormous offerings in scientific discovery, a stage of continuous change. And this change is not easy to accept. People don't like, I don't like to lift my foot, as some American senator once said, I don't like to lift my foot before I don't know where to set it. So this is, of course, can be considered as a ridiculous remark, and evidently he wants to have the decision made before he makes the experiment. He never has known anything about research and development, for instance, or the crisis, or the test, or the risk. For instance, the history of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, or the building of cathedrals. You probably have many, or all the things which have been done from scratch without any often in a very pragmatic way, which one had to take chances. And this taking chances is, for instance, one of the spirits which has been lost in recent time. One talks always, immediately there will be a committee be engaged to investigate if there is a possibility that something can go wrong. Now, we cannot accept that everything can go right, so we have to accept also the element of risk. And this is absolutely natural, and the whole history of mankind is written in this way. So we inventing, we are building constantly. We are building, let me say, just to mention here a few things, let me say, electricity, light. There are wires, this whole house here, that building here is covered with a network of wires and then tubes and the water pipes, cold and warm water, and the sewer and the gas line, the gas line, and probably in the kitchen, or if there's no power, and everything. Anyway, everything, we're adding practically every day a new invention. And every new invention requires, of course, some kind of discipline to accept that the benefits of this invention and to live with it. One of the classical examples is that finally now, at the end of the 1900, of this decade, which until 1980, probably most people in civilized countries will have gotten used to street signs and street signals, red, yellow, and green, or those fantastic color schemes on the street floor. And so we finally, people move in a different way. They don't go diagonal, they don't cross the street diagonal anymore. They go over to the pedestrian crossing, and all this changes clandestinely and slowly the man's habits, and he has to live with it. And then this kind of outburst to say, we are sick and tired of this life in cities or civilization, so we go in the country. Now if they are rich enough, I always say, they should do it. They may enjoy it. They live in the country. That's beautiful, and so. But they will also make certain experiences. They may make them return to the benefits of the big city. But here again, I became utterly convinced that the progression of those inventions, the gadgets culture, which in America is probably particularly strong, makes life sometimes very easy. It is interesting in this, particularly in America, particularly in regard to what I said about people going in the country. Yeah, actually, go in the country. I know some of them they become so bored that they really don't know what to do there because they have no purpose, just leaving the city. America's history is a fascinating history. It happened by coincidence to know a little bit about it. It was originally the immigrants which left Europe and went to America. Their purpose was they wanted to leave. There have been such type of people. They wanted to leave the country, the world, the modern world already. One of them is, I have to remind you, in the Industrial Revolution, 1851, the Crystal Palace and so on, and they have been really, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So we go to America, and there we're building a religious Quaker state, which shall be the first agricultural country in the world. I think something like probably Mao Zedong's China, maybe, even if I don't know too much, but I have a sense this was the initial idea. And it began this way. They never wanted to have big cities. They never wanted to have this, but happened that it should happen. And then it did happen. It started with cotton gin, with this machine to clean cotton. And the second one was, of course, the farming machines from International Harvester, which finally resulted that the first industrialized society in the United States has been the most conservative, reactionary society, this kind of society for which anything that was connected with progress was to be rejected and was dangerous. This society made America an industrialized country because the blessing of the distribution of energy and power in the field and in their farms was so evident they couldn't afford the luxury not to use those things. And so it was very much against the will of those people. One can still today see it when you drive to the country, direct and indirect. It was like as if you open a box of Pandora and then all the evil things come out and they are penetrating mankind, but the good things, they evaporate in space and they never reach men. And I don't know if you know the Pandoras Box, which is a very significant story. It is the story when I think Zeus was mad about men. The Prometheus, he has stolen the fire from heaven and gave it to men, and which is evidently energy, and then he punished him by chaining him on the rocks. You know this story. It's too bloody to tell you. And every day comes this bird, what was it, an eagle, yeah, something, torn out his liver, yeah. Highly belongs in the medical department, and Pandora was punished with this box story. Yeah. Now, it is what it did was it created this kind of world which to make our life more livable, we are constantly forced. This may be a kind of philosophical reason, you know, by everything which we are adding to our comfort, to our way of survival, we are shortening our own freedom, and finally creating a kind of maze or a labyrinth which we cannot escape anymore. And as more inventions we make, we're adding more and more. But then certain things happen which are most fascinating. For instance, then I could never, for instance, particularly in the 50s, there was even a time in which I think we had we had those big airplanes there, the what was this? TAW, yeah, and the TWA, Trans World Airline, yeah, TWA, and they could fly with speed. And everybody said how short the world is now. The distance, everything shrinks, everything becomes so small. I can go from Washington to London in 3 hours and 35 minutes. And probably Bocke will arrive right now, and he is actually arriving ahead of time. He's really can do better than I, because when he goes from here, he comes 2 hours earlier, arrives in Washington as he departs. This is something. Because the change of east-west, and west-east. Well, and anyway, the world shrinks, but immediately there is some kind of built-in compensation. This built-in compensation in this case is, for instance, we're making progress to go deeper and deeper into the inner life. I like to say microphotography, for instance. Yeah? This is one of those things. Or the electronic scanning photography. We can discover worlds now inside. So it is as if when the distance of this world was once this way, then it goes deeper in here. It shortens here, becomes smaller, but it will becomes wider from the inside. This kind of strange relation, which is very interesting. Anybody who engages himself in this painful business of design, he can discover certain things when you think in terms of going in this direction and turning in this one. Yeah? And so this science and technology and all those things which have had those impacts on me have created then this other image. This is I found this once in Italy. There was a beautiful magazine which still exists, which has a beautiful title. The title is La civiltà della macchina, the civilization of machines. Then I begin to ask myself, and this was something which I read when I just had discovered that machines are also sort of beings, not in the sense that you say the computer brain will take over and will control men. All those baloney, those old women's stories, you can tell each other in the park bench, those ridiculous stories. Now this period is over, but to see in let me see performance standard that the human brain is capable to look clearer and slightly more precise into facts, and can dissect them and can control them. And I will, if this materialized, I think next week I will give an additional interpretation, more in direction what we are doing, or what we did, or what I did, and the students did in California and in other places. I will show that it is not necessarily, for instance, the expression of let me say, this man is trustworthy because he uses a planer and sweating, planing, or he used the handsaw. He is a brave, good craftsman. But this rotten guy, he is a technician, and he stays there with. He divides. The craftsman uses the yardstick and his thumb, or maybe he talks about 2 1/4 inches or 2 3/16, But this other fellow, he talks about minutes and seconds, and he talks about precision, which man could never control, and today, with the greatest of ease, can be multiplied. This attracted me very, very much. And I found out that between craftsman and hand tool and scientific control technology and machine and the kinetic action of machines, this repetition, this what the rhythm, which, and the fact that tools are now there, which are not tools which are designed to make, to deal with metal or with fiber products, such as timber or wood, or minerals such as concrete or glass and so on. But machines are anonymous, and they're doing only beautiful work, and I understand it precisely. I can follow it. Then I became, of course, very much convinced that at one time in my life I said, in some paper, I said, I'm sorry. I was always very proud that I'm a craftsman, and then I said, I'm sorry. If I would have had in my early childhood more information, I would rather have wished I would have become a tool maker, because the tool maker is the master craftsman of the 20th century, and this I have said many, many times. Then I in my life, I became always exposed to all kinds of things, and I had some instinct always to go in the wrong direction, namely in this direction where anything happened, and that each time shocked me. Talk about electricity, electricity is for most people electricity, but if you would know what the stages to which the development of electricity since the second half of the 19th century went on, and the enormous rapid, this famous curve which goes high up like this, where the electricity, we call this the single phase and double phase, and then suddenly the solid state technique, which is the transistor world, and this came up. And then the power stations, the power dams, the water, the wind, the fuel, the coal, and then suddenly nuclear energy can make electric, can turn those dynamos and so on. And then I realized nothing is there. Everything has to be done. And it was no question anymore in my mind how I should look at my world. When I was very young, and I'm talking now so about the beginning of my age, when I was so about 20 and so on, I was terribly unhappy, and I realized I'm born too late, because everything what is fabulous and beautiful and impressive has been done already in this world. And I saw the Middle European culture, and I saw those breathtaking buildings there. And I said, those palaces and castles and whatever, and I said, it's too late now for me. Too bad. I wish I would have born 200 years ago. And then came the next period of time, was that I could cry when I was about 40. Here, just when I arrived in the United States. And that's, at this time, I felt I'm born much, much too early, because everything is coming, and I can't reach it. It will take hundreds of years. And then came the certainly I began about in the 50s, I realized it is just the right time. Now everything will happen. The enormous preparations which have been made, which is difficult to explain how gigantic this whole stage is set, is fantastic. And now I suspect that from now until the year 2001 events will take place which we cannot, we have no idea about it. And people will adjust themselves.
Might be pop.
No, first of all, I think...
Not only as the happened right now, but as ever has been are right now in this room. All we have to have distinctive little instruments to pick it up, which we can do. You know, we have certain channels, we can put a lot of